My abusive mother is dying, and my family expects me to care for her anyway. I, 27F, am the oldest of three. My sister is 25 and my brother is 24. We grew up in a house that looked perfectly normal from the sidewalk. My father was the provider, a man who was physically present but emotionally a void. He worked 60 hours a week, came home, sat in his recliner, and expected dinner to be served. He didn't care about our grades, our feelings, or the fact that his wife was a psychological terrorist. As long as the bills were paid and the lawn was mowed, he was done. My mother was the sun our world orbited around, but for me, she was a sun that only burned. I was born with a defect that I couldn't help. I look exactly like her late mother. My grandmother was, by all accounts, a difficult and cruel woman, and my mother spent her life hating her. When I was born, my mother didn't see a baby. She saw her enemy's ghost return to haunt her. She told me this constantly. I remember being 4 years old, sitting on the floor playing with blocks, and she would walk by, stop, and just stare at me with this look of pure, unadulterated loathing. "You have her eyes," she'd whisper, her voice dripping with venom. "You're a punishment sent to drive me crazy. I look at you, and I see everything I hate." By the time I was 5, she had effectively divorced me. She would hold my siblings, kiss their foreheads, and make them feel like the most precious things on earth. But if I touched her arm, she would recoil as if I were a leper. "Don't touch me," she'd snap. "I am repulsed by your existence. Go find someone else to comfort you, because you will never get it from me." She never touched me again. No hugs. No tucking me in. Not even a hand on my shoulder when I graduated. The neglect was calculated. She stopped cooking for me when I was 5. While she prepared balanced meals for my brother and sister, I was told I was on my own. I spent my childhood standing on a stool, microwaving oatmeal, or making soggy sandwiches. But it wasn't just neglect, it was active psychological warfare. If I tried to eat the food she bought, she would sometimes block the kitchen door. "That food isn't for you," she'd say. "You're a parasite. Go to your room and starve to death. Maybe then I'll finally have some peace." I remember one specific Sunday. I was about 8. The house smelled like roast chicken and potatoes. I was so hungry my stomach was actually cramping. I walked into the dining room, thinking maybe, just maybe, today would be different. My sister was sitting in her chair, and my mother was spooning gravy onto her plate. She looked up at me, her eyes turning into cold slits. "Where do you think you're going?" she asked. "I'm hungry, Mom," I whispered. "You're not my daughter," she said, her voice calm and terrifying. "You're a reincarnation of a witch. Witches don't need Sunday dinner. Get out of my sight before I get sick." I spent that night in my room, chewing on a piece of leather from an old belt just to have something in my mouth. My father sat 3 feet away from that conversation and never looked up from his newspaper. When my grandmother finally died, my mother didn't mourn. She celebrated. She hired a sitter, went out drinking with her friends, and the next day she made cakes and cookies for my siblings. She told me, "I never loved her, and I can never love you. I hate you more now because you're the only thing keeping her memory alive." I left the day I turned 18. I didn't even pack everything. I just took what I could fit in a bag and disappeared. I've been in therapy for 8 years, trying to unlearn the idea that I am a punishment. I've had to work through eating disorders, severe depression, and a total inability to trust anyone. I went no contact for almost a decade, only seeing her from a distance at my siblings' events. Now, she has ALS. Her muscles are wasting away. She's also in kidney failure. She's dying, and it's a slow, ugly process. My siblings want me to help. They've designed a care schedule. They want me to take the death watch shifts, the late nights, and the long weekends when the fatigue is the worst. They sat me down at a diner last week, looking like shells of themselves. "We can't do this alone, me," my sister said, her eyes red from crying. "She's so heavy to lift now. She needs the bedpan changed every few hours. She needs the suction machine for her saliva. We're losing our minds." I looked at them, 2 people who were loved by the woman I feared, and I felt a coldness in my chest. "No," I said. "I'm not coming back." "How can you say that?" my brother shouted, drawing looks from other tables. "She's dying. Whatever she did to you, it's over. She can't hurt you anymore. She can't even lift her hand. She has a tongue, I said. And, according to you, she's still using it. I know exactly what will happen. I'll be sitting there, cleaning her, and she'll look at me and tell me she wishes I died instead of her mother. I won't be able to stay humane. I'll snap. I'll tell her I'm glad she's suffering. I'll make her final moments a living hell, and I don't want to be that person. I've worked too hard to be a good person to let her turn me back into a monster. My brother leaned across the table. We know she was a bitch. We admitted she'd probably have killed you if you were the sick one. But you're not her. You're better than her. Do this for us. We're your family. You were the family she loved, I replied. I was the ghost in the attic. You want me to set myself on fire to keep you warm, but where were you when I was 7 and starving? You were eating roast chicken while I was in the laundry room. They told me they were children then and couldn't have helped. I know that's true, but it doesn't change the fact that they are now asking me to traumatize myself for their convenience. The pressure has become unbearable. My sister sends me videos of my mother struggling to swallow, with captions like, "Is this what you wanted?" My brother shows up at my apartment. My father called me for the first time in years just to tell me I was a cold-hearted disappointment. They say I'm holding on to the past, but the past isn't a suitcase I can just put down. It's my bones. It's the way I flinch when people move too fast. It's the way I still can't look at a roast chicken without feeling a panic attack coming on. They keep saying she's different now because she's weak. But weakness doesn't equal goodness. A dying snake is still a snake. My brother told me that when he mentioned I might come help, she whispered, "Don't let that thing in here. I don't want to die looking at her mother's face." And yet, they still expect me to go. They think that because I'm the strong one who moved out and built a life, I have some endless reservoir of strength to draw from. They don't realize that my strength is actually just a very thin crust over a deep well of terror. Tonight, my brother is outside. He just sent another text. "Mom had a bad fall today. We almost couldn't get her up. Please. Just one night. For me." My hand is hovering over the block button. If I go, I lose myself. If I stay, I lose my siblings. They're already starting to talk about me like I'm the villain. In their version of the story, they are the grieving children and I am the bitter, vengeful sister who abandoned them in their hour of need. They don't see that I was abandoned 22 years ago in that same house. Am I the asshole? My therapist says I'm protecting my inner child, but my brother's face at that diner keeps haunting me. He looked so tired. They are suffering, but the source of their suffering is the woman who spent her life making me suffer. Why is it my job to fix it? I can hear him honking the horn now. A short, desperate burst. He won't leave. He thinks if he stays long enough, I'll break. And the worst part? A part of me, the part that still desperately wants to be good enough for this family, actually wants to open the door. Am I the a-hole for staying inside, for letting them drown because I'm too afraid of the woman in the bed? I feel like I'm being forced to choose between being a good sister and being a sane person, and I don't think I can be both. Update. I didn't open the door that night. I sat on the floor with my back pressed against it while my brother kept texting, and honking like persistence alone could rewrite 27 years of history. Eventually, the truck drove away. The silence afterward felt unreal, like the air had been sucked out of the building. I thought that would be the worst of it, that refusing in person would finally make them understand I meant what I said. Instead, that night was the beginning of something much uglier. The messages escalated almost immediately. At first, they sounded desperate, still framed as grief and exhaustion. My sister sent paragraphs about how little sleep they were getting, how the nurses were expensive, how they were drowning financially and emotionally. I didn't respond. I muted the conversation because every notification made my chest tighten. Within a day, the tone changed. Desperation turned into accusation. Suddenly, I wasn't just unavailable. I was cruel, selfish, and actively harming them by refusing to help. They started rewriting our childhood in real time. According to them, our mother hadn't been abusive. She'd been strict and emotionally complicated. My memories were described as exaggerations created by therapy. My sister told me I had always been dramatic and sensitive, that Mom treated all of us harshly sometimes. Reading that felt like being pushed back into the house again, like the years of work I'd done to accept reality were being peeled away sentence by sentence. Then the guilt campaigns began. My sister sent videos daily. Not occasional updates. Daily footage of our mother struggling to breathe, choking while trying to swallow water, crying in frustration when her hands wouldn't cooperate. Some clips were clearly filmed without her awareness. Others showed her staring directly into the camera while my siblings narrated what she was going through. Each message carried captions implying I was responsible for her suffering continuing without relief. I asked them once, calmly, to stop sending videos. I said it was triggering and that I had already made my decision. That request flipped something in them. My brother replied with a long message accusing me of lacking empathy entirely. He said any normal daughter would want to know how their dying parent was doing. He said my refusal proved our mother had been right about me all along. After that, the harassment stopped pretending to be concern. They began contacting people in my life. My sister found my workplace email somehow and sent a message to HR claiming I was mentally unstable and abandoning a dying parent. It didn't get me in trouble because the email was clearly personal drama, but having coworkers quietly ask if everything was okay felt humiliating. My brother messaged my friends through social media, telling them I had fabricated abuse stories for attention and that I was letting my mother die alone out of spite. I realized then that this wasn't grief talking anymore. It was punishment. They started showing up without warning, not just that first night. My brother returned twice more, parking outside for long stretches. Once he pounded on the door hard enough that my downstairs neighbor called me asking if I was safe. Another time, he circled the building repeatedly, texting screenshots of my car in the lot like proof I couldn't hide. Each message carried the same undertone. They would not leave me alone until I complied. My sister took a different approach. She called non-stop from different numbers after I blocked her first one. When I stopped answering unknown calls, she began leaving voicemails describing our mother's condition in graphic detail. Some messages included our mother's voice in the background, weak but unmistakably venomous. Even through illness, that tone hadn't changed. In one recording, she muttered that she didn't want that thing near her bed. Hearing it after years of distance felt like being dropped into ice water. I realized they weren't asking me to help anymore. They were trying to drag me back emotionally by force. The breaking point came about 3 weeks later. I came home from work and found a printed letter taped to my apartment door. It was written by my siblings together, full of accusations about abandonment and moral failure. They said if I refused to help, they would tell extended family the truth about me. They claimed they would make sure everyone knew I was responsible for tearing the family apart during our mother's final months. At the bottom was a line saying they hoped I could live with myself when she died, knowing I refused to show basic humanity. Something shifted in me when I read that. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. For years I had assumed they were victims of the same household in a different way, that maybe love had blinded them, but underneath it they were still my siblings. That letter made it obvious they were willing to weaponize anything, including my trauma, to get what they wanted. I blocked both of them everywhere that night. I thought that would end it. Instead, the harassment intensified because now they had lost direct access. My brother started leaving handwritten notes under my windshield wipers. My sister mailed packages containing childhood photos with messages written on the back accusing me of abandoning family. One package contained a picture of me as a child standing alone at a birthday party, with the words, "You've always been heartless," written across it. I began checking over my shoulder constantly. Every knock at the door made my stomach drop. Sleep became shallow because I kept expecting another confrontation outside. My therapist used the word re-traumatization, which sounded clinical but didn't fully capture how invasive it felt to have my past dragged into my present again. The situation crossed into something unmistakably malicious when they started contacting my landlord. They told him I was unstable and might cause disturbances. He called me confused and concerned, asking if there was a domestic dispute he needed to know about. Explaining the situation out loud made me realize how far things had gone. This wasn't family conflict anymore. It was harassment. I documented everything after that: screenshots, voicemails, photos of notes left on my car. My therapist strongly encouraged me to consider legal protection. At first, the idea felt extreme. Filing anything against my own siblings sounded surreal, like admitting there was no coming back from this. But the alternative was continuing to live in fear of when the next message or visit would happen. The final incident removed any doubt. Late one evening, my brother showed up again, this time drunk. He shouted outside my building, accusing me of killing our mother through neglect. Neighbors came out onto balconies. Someone recorded part of it. I stayed inside, shaking, while he yelled that I would regret this forever and that he wouldn't let me hide from what I'd done. Police were eventually called by someone else in the building. By the time officers arrived, he had left, but the humiliation and fear lingered long after. The next morning, I went to the courthouse and filed for a restraining order. Sitting there filling out paperwork felt unreal. Writing their names under respondent made my hands tremble. I kept thinking about how we used to share a house, birthdays, holidays. Now I was listing incidents of harassment like evidence against strangers. The clerk didn't react emotionally. To her, it was routine. That normalcy somehow made it easier. She told me I had more than enough documentation. When my siblings were served, their reaction was explosive. They sent messages through extended family calling me vindictive and cruel for involving the legal system. Relatives started reaching out, urging me to reconsider because grief makes people act irrationally. None of those relatives had received hundreds of messages or found threats taped to their door. None of them had sat awake at night listening for footsteps outside. The court granted a temporary restraining order quickly due to the documented pattern. Seeing it approved brought relief, mixed with grief I didn't expect. It meant acknowledging that whatever relationship we once had was effectively over. Predictably, my siblings escalated their narrative publicly. Social media posts appeared describing me as an ungrateful daughter abandoning a dying mother and attacking grieving siblings through legal action. Friends sent me screenshots asking if I was okay. I stopped reading comments because strangers felt entitled to judge a story they barely understood. Through all of this, our mother's condition continued declining somewhere else, mostly relayed through secondhand updates I never asked for. I felt complicated emotions about that: sadness, distance, occasional flashes of anger, but not guilt in the way they insisted I should. Therapy helped me understand that refusing to re-enter abuse isn't cruelty. It's survival. The restraining order created physical distance, but emotionally I'm still processing how quickly my siblings turned from pleading to cruelty. Looking back, I see patterns that existed long before this. They learned loyalty through exclusion. They learned love came with conditions. When I refused to meet their expectations, they responded the same way our mother always had: punishment, shame, and control. The difference now is that I'm not a child trapped in that house anymore. My apartment is quiet again. No trucks idling outside. No notes under my windshield. Sometimes I still jump when my phone lights up, expecting another attack, but slowly that reflex is fading. Blocking them and pursuing legal protection didn't feel empowering in a dramatic way. It felt heavy and sad and necessary. I don't know what will happen when our mother eventually dies. I assume they will blame me for that too. Maybe they already do. What I know now is that protecting my sanity doesn't make me evil, even if that's the role they've assigned me. For the first time since this started, the silence around me isn't threatening. It's just quiet. And after a lifetime of chaos, quiet feels like something worth defending, even if defending it meant cutting off the last ties to people I once believed were my family. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update for more such stories.